Hi, I'm Tamara, and this is TELUS Talks with Tamara Taggart. Hi, everyone. Today I'm speaking with Dr. Melissa Lem, who is a family physician in Vancouver, and she's the founder and director of PaRx. It's Canada's National Nature Prescription Program, all powered by the BC PaRx Foundation. It's fascinating. It's a great conversation. I hope you enjoy it. Hi, Dr. Lem. It's great to see you.
Hi, Tamara. Likewise.
So can I call you Melissa?
Please do.
Perfect. I am excited about this conversation because, I love talking to doctors. I like talking about healthcare and how we can look after our health, our mental health, any, tips. And because it's so hard to get a family doctor nowadays, we're missing so much. And there's a lot of really interesting new studies and information out there. And when I saw your work and your connection to healthcare and nature and the climate, I was just like, this is the answer to we all need to be thinking like this. So when somebody says to you, what do? What keeps you busy during the day? How do you describe your job?
I usually answer, first of all, with my day job. So I am a Vancouver-based family physician, but I also do rural work within rural BC and in the Northwest Territories. But along with that, I'm also president of the Canadian Association of Physicians for the Environment and director of PaRx prescriptions for the BC PaRx Foundation, which is Canada's National Nature Prescription Initiative. I'm also a mom. So I have a lot of things on my plate that keep me busy.
Yeah, no kidding. So how did you, did you always want to be in healthcare? And did you always care about climate change?
When I was a kid, my family would call me a tree hugger. And the funny thing is, I grew up in a family of 5 kids. I am the middle child, so I have one of everything. And none of the other kids in my family were tree huggers. But from a very young age, I fell in love with nature. I remember spending time in my father's garden when I was growing up. And it was really a place for me to escape from the pressures of life. I grew up in a majority white neighborhood in Toronto, in the suburbs of Toronto, and didn't always feel like I belonged because I looked different from the other kids on the playground and was bullied to a certain extent. But I remember going to a national park for the first time in my life, Bruce Peninsula National Park, and seeing the stars for the first time away from the glow of the city and thinking, this is where I want to be for the rest of my life. This is what I want to do. So your question as to whether or not I always wanted to work in healthcare, the answer is no. I wanted to be all kinds of different things when I was a kid, from an astronaut to a journalist, actually, to an environmental biologist. But I found myself in healthcare because of encouragement from my parents to be a physician. And somehow I found my way back to my original interest that I had as a child in communications in the natural world, and got to wrap that all up into what I do as a doctor. So I think I'm doing what I want to do now as an adult, which is great.
It is great. I looked you up and I read a lot of the things that, a lot of interviews you did and you've done. And I see a lot of pictures of you and your son walking through nature and talking about plants. And did things change for you once you became a mother?
Things changed in that I knew how important it was for me to get outside with my child, but I found it that much more difficult to do it at the same time. Because especially when you have a newborn or a baby under 1 year old, so much of your time is spent with getting them to sleep, with changing their diapers, with making sure that you're stimulating them in the right way. But something I found when he was very young, my son was very young, he's 8 years old now, was that we had to get outside for my own mental health. Because if we didn't take that time, I lived in Toronto at the time, in almost downtown Toronto. If I didn't get outside for at least half an hour every day, and we're talking in -30 with my son cuddled on my front in a carrier, I just wouldn't feel like I was up to the challenge always of taking care of my family and taking care of myself. So it both made me aware of how important it was to get outside into nature, but also introduce some challenges at the same time.
Is there proof that being outside is good for us?
There is so much proof, Tamara, that being outside is good for us. And this is something that I discovered myself just over a decade ago. So I had this intuitive sense that when I headed outside, I felt better, I felt calmer, more connected. But when I had a nature deficit experience, so this happened when I moved from northern BC, which was my first job as a rural family doctor, down to downtown Toronto, where suddenly my view wasn't mountains and bears and forest, it was skyscrapers essentially. I felt more stressed, even though the work itself was far easier working as kind of an outpatient doctor downtown versus in the ER and delivering babies in northern BC. And so I thought, you know what? I don't know why I feel so much edgier when I'm actually doing easier work. And then I realized one day that I thought I was missing nature. And so I thought, as a doctor, there's no such thing as this feeling. It has to be backed up by randomized controlled trials and evidence. So I started to look into the evidence base behind it and found this huge body of evidence I had no idea about behind the research backed benefits of nature time and living in proximity to nature and even being able to see nature and hear the sounds of nature for your health. So this is a body of research that is several decades deep, hundreds, if not at this point, thousands of studies that back up the idea that spending time outside in nature is one of the best things that we can do for our health. So it can improve conditions such as high blood pressure, cholesterol issues, prenatal outcomes, ADHD in children, anxiety and depression. There's almost no condition that spending time in nature isn't good for.
I was thinking the other day about I have 3 kids and, it's always a rush, right? Everything's a rush. Everything's in a panic, whether it's bedtime or getting to school in the morning or whatever it might be, right? It's like, come on, let's go. And then we crash at the end of the day. We just crash. We're tired. We're laying around on the couch. We got to do it all over again tomorrow. When I was a kid, I remember having an earlier dinner and we always went for a walk after dinner. I remember going for a walk after dinner. And I thought, why don't I do that? Like, why don't I just say, hey, we're going to go for a walk after dinner? Is it little things like that put us outside? Or are you talking about, no, we need to go for a family hike every Saturday. We need to do you see where I'm getting at here? Like, is it little steps that help us get outside?
I think there's this concept of a pyramid of nature exposure. So there are the everyday nature exposures like you would do with your family on a little walk. And by the way, our family does that too. We don't always have the time to head out into the great wild every day, but certainly try to do that on the weekends. So building in those little nature doses can be really useful. And I think knowing that nature is so important for our health gives us the permission to prioritize it. And we know we're really busy. Our kids probably do a lot of things. They're in various sports and different after school pursuits. But I think we have to remember to set aside that unstructured time for us to spend time together as a family, or it could be them with their friends as well, in a park or going for a walk, because we know that it's good for our brains. We know that it's good for our bodies. And so finding ways to inject a little bit of nature time into every day can be really useful. And then when you're planning a family vacation or when you're thinking about what you're going to do on the weekend, try to plan it around a nature experience.
So is this stuff they taught you in medical school? Did you learn all about nature as, a health benefit in medical school?
I wish. Wouldn't that have been great? Because I wouldn't have had to have that nature deficit experience, right? No. So 10, 12 years ago, when I first happened upon this body of research, I had not heard anything about it. And so when I did hear about it, when I found out the research, it was like this big aha moment. I thought, wow, I didn't learn this in medical school. None of my colleagues are talking about this. I need to make it my mission to educate my colleagues, to educate the public decision makers about the fact that nature is so good for us. And hopefully that'll shift policy in a way such that we have more nature-rich cities, people will prioritize it more, and we'll just see a healthier population and a healthier healthcare system at the same time.
So let's talk about the BC PaRx Foundation. And, for other people listening elsewhere in Canada, it's, we're talking about our parks, our Canadian parks, our provincial and territory parks. We're talking about these beautiful spaces that we have that, we should be enjoying. You connected with the BC PaRx Foundation to prescribe nature, is that right? To prescribe getting outside?
That's right. So the BC Parks Foundation launched PaRx. I'm the director of PaRx in November 2020, but I've been working with them since about 2018 when they started operations on the nature and health file. And so I had this idea that I wanted to launch a nature prescription program for a very long time before I connected with them because I'd heard what colleagues in the US were doing with their nature prescription initiatives. And it turns out they had the same idea and wanted to put resources and energy behind that. So it was like a match made in heaven. When we met in 2018, I became director of the PARX program in 2019. And then we continued to work together along with help from colleagues across the country. So I also want to shout out the Canadian Association of Physicians for the Environment, because advocates in every province who get this idea that nature is important for our health in so many ways took the concept and ran with it and helped us launch in every province across Canada. So we completed launches in every province with Newfoundland and Labrador in June. And we have a French language program called Prescrit Nature in Quebec. So it's a national program right now, which I'm so proud of.
So how does it, for somebody listening that has, is like me, is just finding out about this, how does it work? Like, how does it work for the average Canadian?
Well, you have to have a regulated healthcare professional that will prescribe nature. And we were talking about the family doctor shortage. It doesn't have to be a family doctor. It can be a registered nurse, a psychologist, a registered clinical counselor, an occupational therapist. Really, any healthcare professional who's part of a licensed body can prescribe nature through our program. So if your regulated health professional is registered in our program, they can literally prescribe nature to you. And we have a standardized recommendation that you spend at least 2 hours in nature each week and at least 20 minutes each time. And then we have a nature prescription file that gets customized with their unique prescriber code that we send to them, and then they can start prescribing nature. And it's a process of working with their patient to come up with a plan that works for them, to figure out what their abilities are, what their interests are, what kind of nature is nearby, and then working with them to figure out how to incorporate it into their everyday life.
Do you think that, I know that change is hard for some people, right? Even change that we know is beneficial. It's still hard. Change is hard. There must be physicians that think this is all like, hocus pocus, whatever. I don't know. Maybe I'm totally wrong. Maybe every single doctor in the history of doctors is like, yes, finally. But I have a feeling that, yeah. Anyways, I just have a feeling that maybe there's somebody out there going, oh, this hocus pocus. You just need to, take these pills and you'll be better. But that's not the case, right? I think that we know, do we know more now? Surely we know more now.
The research base is only growing. And what's interesting, Tamara, is that right now, over 5% of all practicing physicians in the country have registered in our program. And we've only been around for 2 years. And when exactly like you mentioned, it takes a while for doctors to adopt new practices. And the fact that we've managed to corral, over 5% of doctors across the country in such a short time, I think speaks to how intuitive this idea is that spending time in nature is great for us. And in BC, where I live, over 15% of all doctors in the province are registered in our program. So I think it's incredible. I think we are seeing a shift, though, overall towards focusing more on prevention, focusing more on lifestyle as prevention and treatment for certain diseases. Most doctors don't like to just write a prescription for a pill. They want to write a prescription for something that's going to have few side effects, that's effective, and that the patient will find acceptable. Something else I want to mention too is something that patients find really acceptable and doctors are really excited about too, is that earlier in 2022, we announced a new collaboration with PaRx Canada, where we can prescribe free PaRx Canada discovery passes to our patients that give them entry to all PaRx Canada sites across the country for free for a year. And so this was something that really put us on the map because, doctors, healthcare professionals are trusted messengers, trusted people. PaRx Canada sites, our national parks are iconic. When people think about Canada, they think about the Rockies, they think about the beautiful forests. And so putting the two together really caught a lot of people's attention. And we've got international attention as a result. The World Health Organization in 2022 at COP26, like the International Climate Change Conference, actually specifically pointed out our program in their COP26 special report on climate change and health as a way to inspire protection and restoration of nature as the foundation of our health. So it's getting all kinds of national attention and international attention too, which is great because it gets the message out and it's an evidence-based message too.
Wow, that's incredible. Really, when you think about it, you're like a pass for a year to get outside
Yeah,
and enjoy.
and it's so important for us not only to prescribe nature, but also to reduce barriers to nature access. And we totally get not everyone lives close to a national park or a Parks Canada administered site. So we're also making partnerships with more nature that's close to urban spaces. Like, for example, here in BC, we have partnered with the UBC Botanical Gardens and Nitobe Garden, and also the Bodell Conservatory, for example, to give people free or discounted access to those spaces as well, because we know not everyone has access to a vehicle and can get to a national park. So we're little by little, we're working on reducing those barriers to nature access.
That's incredible. So let's talk about, becoming a climate activist. Yeah, I mean, would you describe yourself as a climate activist?
I would like to describe myself as an climate advocate because I feel like the word activist, it's a bit more loaded. You kind of imagine people, rappelling up the side of a tanker or something or blocking traffic or whatever. So I like to approach it in a more positive way because in my role as president of CAPE, we dialogue with all kinds of different people. Patients in our offices, with decision makers, ministers at all levels of government. So we just want to make sure that the message we're getting across will be receptive. People will be receptive to it. So yeah, I mean, there's so much work that I do on the nature front, on the climate change front, to try to make sure that we have a healthy planet for healthy people.
Do you think that it is for young people, kids that are, in their teens now, early 20s? I mean, it feels really depressing at times when we think about the environment, our climate. We're seeing the effects of climate change every summer in British Columbia and elsewhere. The flooding that's happening in California. It's here. Like we are actually experiencing it in quite a few places, and it's really. Someone my age, we've watched it unfold really, but now it's here. How does that affect a young person's outlook on life if it feels like, all the old people aren't doing anything about it?
I think you've hit the nail on the head there, Tamara. There was a big survey that was done and the results were released last year looking at how young people feel about climate change. And the vast majority of them across the world feel like the world is a scary place, like climate change is a big problem. But the interesting thing is that what they were bothered most by was their impression that adults and decision makers weren't doing enough about it. Not the actual changes that were going to happen, but the fact that there's just this stagnant issue with what we're doing as adults. So I think it's really important for young people to see adults taking charge, taking action in whatever ways we can. And, no one's saying you have to become the president of a national environmental organization or anything, but we do what we can. And we have these conversations with our kids and we honor the feelings that they have and say, this is what we can do about it as a family. This is what we can do about it as a community, and kind of join with these advocacy groups so we can amplify our voices together and make more effective action. I think it's really important for people who have climate anxiety to find out what they can do, because once you start acting on it, it doesn't feel so helpless anymore. You see, there are other people working in this area. These are the differences we're making together, and together we can actually try to solve this problem. But it's when you get paralyzed in inaction that I think those feelings start to spiral and you start to get more hopeless.
Yeah, it definitely, I can understand that for sure. And I mean, when you talk about, I saw you talk in something, I can't remember what it was, and you said that it was important for you to walk the walk, or something like that. And you said, I can't be out there, talking about getting into nature and caring about the environment, and then I'm driving like a big, huge, SUV, that's guzzling, or I can't be living in a big mansion with 8 bedrooms and 8 bathrooms. And how important do you think that is for all of us to understand?
I think it's important for us, like you said, to walk the walk, but that means different things for different people. Different people come from different backgrounds. They have different priorities. And so I'm not going to look down on a colleague for living in a big house, especially if it's like a multi-generational home. If you have 5 kids and you need to take them to all their different sports, maybe you need a car, But for example, with our family, we have 1 child. We live in close proximity to everything that we might need. So we don't necessarily need to own a vehicle. For example, we actually don't own a car. We made that choice when we moved to Vancouver from Toronto to sell our hybrid. And we've managed to get by so far. So it's, I think it's making the changes that you can, making the changes in line with your priorities. But I certainly, like I said, I'm not going to look down on any colleagues who do make the same changes as I do.
I'm not trying to get you to to spill something on other people, but I just thought it was such a good point and I think what I'm trying to understand is we have so much social media in front of us, right? Where we're able to pick up our phone at any time and see what people all around the world are doing. And a lot of times on social media, there's it's not real, right? Or it's showy, or however you want to put it. So if somebody is on social media and they're talking about the environment and stuff like that, we don't know what they're driving at home. We don't know, we don't know all of those things. And so I think that when you said that, I just drew this line to how looking at social media makes me feel, yet we don't really know any of these people. Well, we do know some of them, you know what I mean? And we don't know how they really live their lives, if they are walking the walk.
Do you know what I think is important, though, is to get the message across that we need to live in a sustainable way. If I think a lot of environmentalists get a lot of flack for owning a certain number of homes or flying around the world or whatever, but they're doing more than people who aren't putting those messages out there. I think we have to do as much as we can to try to live our values. But again, just putting out the message that climate change is real, it is a health threat, and we have to take action on it, no matter what vehicle you might own or where you live, is important. That said, I still think we should try to be examples. We as a family decided to try not to fly as much and just to, eat more plant-rich meals, for example, so that we do live our values. But again, everyone has a different threshold and everyone can do what they can in the time that they have.
I like that because it's just more positive, right? And then I just find that because it can be so upsetting, the climate, when you put it that way, the way that you just said it, it's like, yeah, I can only control what I do. And so, I love that you just, told us that you don't have a car. I don't know how you do that. But I mean, that gives me hope, right? That we can all do these little things that hopefully add up to something really big to make a difference.
That's
what do
right.
you get excited about? What excites you about this work that you're doing?
It has to be nature and health. That's why I spend so much time on it, is because I am a grown-up tree hugger, in many ways still a tree hugger. And I love seeing the impact that spreading the word about nature and health has. It's changed the conversation about the importance of biodiversity and nature for our health. And I was doing a presentation actually recently at COP15. It's the UN Biodiversity Conference that happened in Montreal. And one of the key people who helped us launch this collaboration with PaRx Canada, a VP, Michael Nadler, spoke about how their collaboration with us actually started changing conversations within PaRx Canada itself. So they started to prioritize more programming and more conversations around health and wellness of their employees and also what they might offer. And so you never know how something you put out there is going to have an impact. And I hear it in so many different ways, from a patient who mentions, oh yeah, I heard about your nature prescription program. I'd like a prescription for nature. Or going and speaking at different conferences and people saying, I love this program. I've told these people about it. My boyfriend loves to go for walks with me because of the prescriptions for nature that we've gotten. So it's just creating so many ripples. And it's amazing to meet people who are working in the space and to see the impact that is having. Definitely nature and health is my love and what sparks my interest right now.
And I was thinking about for people who have mobility challenges, right? And so it's not always easy to get out into nature, get out to a park. You mentioned that earlier. I know somebody who's quite sick and they're at home and they have been, and with the pandemic, it's been very difficult for people to get around, and they set up so they can open their door, and there's a bird feeder platform right there. And also like some nuts and stuff for the squirrels, because it's bringing nature to her. It's bringing these little critters to her window, to her space where she can watch them because she can't leave the house. And, I guess that's really what this is all about too, right? Is meeting the patient where they're at to get whatever it does to our brain. Like, what does that do to our brain when we see critters eating their little, seeds and stuff?
So many good different things. So there are two major psychological theories behind why nature is good for our brains. The first one is called attention restoration theory. And it says that these busy urban environments tax our powers of conscious attention, and this increases fatigue and irritability and stress. But when you spend time in nature, it's interesting, but it doesn't require you to constantly direct your focus. And so it restores your powers of attention and reduces that fatigue and irritability. There's also a theory called stress reduction theory, which says that when we spend time in nature after stressful events, nature actually helps our brains be more resilient and recover faster. There are also volatile organic compounds that we smell called phytoncides in nature that have shown to boost our immune systems. When you spend time in nature, this is a stress reducer, so it reduces cortisol, which we know is a stress hormone that causes all kinds of inflammation when it's in too high concentrations in our bloodstream. So there's so many different ways nature is good for our brains and is good for our bodies. And we know that when we have healthy bodies, we typically have healthy brains and better moods too.
Yes. Okay. So we like to give back and thank our guests for being here. And we do that by asking our guests to choose a Canadian nonprofit. You chose, this is shocking, you chose the BC PaRx Foundation. I'm glad you did. And, the BC PaRx Foundation protects, enhances, and sustains parks while inspiring and connecting people to them. We will be giving them $500 in your name to thank you for being here. So thank you for choosing BC PaRx Foundation. I really appreciate that. And for you spending your time here to talk about this. What if someone's listening right now and they're like, I never considered using nature as something for my own, health, to benefit my health. What are some things that people could do if they've never done that before? They've never gone to, Pacific Spirit Park and gone for a walk because they're scared they're going to get lost or whatever it might be. What are suggestions you give to patients?
I would say number one, give yourself permission to prioritize nature. View it as a non-negotiable, just as important as brushing your teeth before bedtime, or eating lunch during your lunch break. It's that important for our health. See it as the fourth pillar of health, just as important as diet, exercise, and sleep at maintaining a healthy lifestyle. And then take baby steps. We're so lucky here in Vancouver to be in close proximity to ocean and forests and parks in many places. So if you're not used to being outside in a park, go sit on a park bench for a while. Slow down, take some breaths, notice the movement in your environment, look at the trees, and then maybe invite a friend. That's one thing about getting off social media, getting off our screens and into the real world is that we connect with real people. And there's evidence showing that when people live in greener areas, they feel less lonely and there are more social connections. So sit on a bench, sit with a friend, and maybe next time go for a walk down that trail, look at something further afield. There's so many different ways we can incorporate more nature into our everyday lives, and it doesn't have to be scary.
Yeah, and I guess we have a little thing at our house where if we're having, whatever challenges or whatever it might be, we're like, okay, we need to go outside and stand on the grass, and we we just go like barefoot, go stand on grass. We need to touch grass. And it's funny how that one little thing can sort of bring you back to, okay, yeah, this is like, I'm overreacting to something or whatever it might be, right? We have these little things that we do. Do you think that, I'm going to assume that your son he loves the outdoors because he doesn't know any different. This is his life, right? He's always been brought outside for nature walks and learns from your example. What if we've never done that with our kids? Is it too late? Can we get them out? Is it ever too late?
It is never too late to head outside in nature. You can do it at any time in your life. You can be 80, you can be 8 months, 8 years old. It's never too late. So to be honest, when my son was very young, I was so focused on his whole routine that we sometimes only had that half hour or 40 minutes outside. And I still remember he had never experienced grass before. He had never touched grass before. And so we went outside. I think he was maybe about 6 months old. I put a blanket out in the grass behind our apartment building where we were living at the time, and he had no idea what it was. I remember he kind of crawled up to the edge and put his hands up like, I don't want to touch that. That green stuff is weird. And so obviously now he's actually a faster hiker than both my husband and myself. Like he's just taken it and gone with it. But not every day. He doesn't always want to go outside and spend time outdoors. Like he's also a reader. He loves to spend time inside too. And so I think when he sees us making it a priority, when we spend time outside together and have fun and let him go at his own pace, that's what's fun for him. So I think we have to figure out as parents, as families, what kind of activities the whole family will enjoy. And then just, sometimes follow our kids' lead is important.
Such great advice, Melissa. Okay, so you're on Twitter at Melissa_Lem. That's Lem. And you're also on Instagram, which is Dr. Melissa Lem. So Dr. Melissa Lem. I can't thank you enough for this. It's a great reminder to get outside and just let nature do its work.
Thanks, Tamara. I am so happy you invited me to chat, and I loved hearing about what your family does too. I'll keep that in mind.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to another episode of TELUS Talks with Tamara Taggart. Be sure to subscribe so you can join us every Tuesday for another conversation. You can also check out our website, telus.com/podcast, and subscribe to our YouTube channel at TELUS Talks.